Picture this. A black clip-on tie from J.C. Penney, left draped across a seat. 8 cigarette butts crushed into an ashtray. A single strand of hair pressed into the fabric of a headrest. And behind a curtain in the rear of the cabin, an open staircase leading out into pitch-black sky. Rain hammering against metal, wind screaming through the fuselage at 200 miles per hour. By the time the crew realized what had happened, the man who'd left those things behind was already gone. Somewhere over the forests of Washington State, in the middle of a November storm, with $200,000 strapped to his body and a parachute on his back. That was November 24th, 1971. He has never been seen since. Not his body, not the money, not a single confirmed trace. For more than 50 years, investigators, amateur sleuths, and documentary filmmakers have asked the same question. Who was D.B. Cooper? But there's a second question that might matter even more. Did he survive? The evening before Thanksgiving, 1971, Portland, Oregon. A man walks up to the Northwest Orient Airlines ticket counter and pays cash for a one-way ticket to Seattle, a 30-minute flight, barely long enough to finish a drink. He gives his name as Dan Cooper. No one asks for identification. That wasn't required back then. He's unremarkable in every way that matters. White, mid-40s, maybe 5'10" to 6 feet tall, 170 pounds or so, olive complexion, dark hair combed neatly back. He's wearing a dark business suit, crisp white shirt, and a narrow black clip-on tie, the kind you could pick up at any department store. A black raincoat, brown loafers. He's carrying a black briefcase and a paper bag. He boards Flight 305, a Boeing 727, takes seat 18 in the rear cabin, orders a bourbon and soda, lights a cigarette, and settles in like any other passenger flying home for the holiday. But shortly after takeoff, something shifts. He pulls a folded note from his pocket and hands it to a young flight attendant named Florence Schaffner. She glances at it, assumes it's a phone number. Travelers hit on flight attendants all the time, and slips it into her purse without reading it. The man leans toward her. His voice is calm, polite. "Miss, you'd better look at that note," he says. "I have a bomb." She opens the note. Block letters, neat and deliberate. "I have a bomb in my briefcase. I want you to sit by me." She sits. He opens the briefcase just enough for her to see inside. Wires, a battery, red cylindrical sticks bundled together. She doesn't know if it's real. She can't take the chance that it isn't. His demands are straightforward. $200,000 in $20 bills. 4 parachutes. He's calm, polite, no panic, no rage. He tells the crew to radio ahead. The airline complies. For nearly 2 hours, the plane circles over Seattle, while the FBI and airline officials scramble to gather the ransom. They pull bills from multiple banks. Before handing them over, the FBI photographs and records the serial number of every single one. The parachutes come from a local skydiving school. 2 main chutes, 2 reserves. One of the reserves, unbeknownst to anyone involved, is a dummy chute, sewn permanently shut, used only for training demonstrations. It's completely useless if deployed in the air. The plane lands in Seattle just before 5:40 in the evening. Cooper allows all 36 passengers to disembark, along with 2 of the 3 flight attendants, in exchange for the money and the parachutes. But he keeps 4 people on board. The captain, William Scott. The first officer, William Raticzak. The flight engineer, Harold Anderson. And the youngest member of the crew, 22-year-old flight attendant Tina Mucklow. She'll spend the rest of the night acting as the go-between, walking back and forth between the cockpit and the cabin, relaying Cooper's instructions to the flight crew. She's the last person known to have seen him, and his instructions are oddly unnervingly specific. He wants the plane to fly toward Mexico City, but not the way a normal commercial flight would. He wants them to stay below 10,000 feet, never exceed 200 knots, flaps locked at 15 degrees, landing gear down the entire time, cabin unpressurized, all interior lights off, and absolutely no one is allowed to come behind the first-class curtain. The crew tells him the 727 can't make it all the way to Mexico under those conditions. It'll run out of fuel. They negotiate a refueling stop in Reno, Nevada. He agrees. The plane takes off again, this time into darkness and worsening weather. Tina Mucklow brings him a cup of coffee. At one point, she asks him why he's doing this. He tells her it's not a grudge against the airline, just a grudge. He doesn't say against what, or who. Somewhere around 8 o'clock that night, over the dense wilderness of southwest Washington, Cooper does something no hijacker had ever done before. The Boeing 727 had a unique feature in that era, a set of aft stairs at the rear of the fuselage that could be lowered in flight. It was a design quirk, mostly used for boarding at smaller airports. Cooper lowers those stairs. The crew feels a sudden change in air pressure. A warning light flashes in the cockpit. And then, nothing. Silence. When the plane lands in Reno and authorities cautiously make their way to the rear cabin, it's empty. The aft stairs are still down, swaying in the wind. The tie is draped across the seat. The cigarette butts are still in the ashtray. 2 of the parachutes are gone. One of the reserves, the sewn-shut dummy, is left behind. The paper bag he'd been carrying, gone too, later determined to have been used to hold the cash. And the man who called himself Dan Cooper has vanished into the night sky, somewhere over one of the most remote, unforgiving stretches of wilderness in the Pacific Northwest. In a rainstorm, in the dark, wearing a business suit and loafers. He was never seen again. The FBI launched one of the most exhaustive investigations in its history, codenamed Norjack. They deployed ground teams into the forests near Ariel, Washington, where they believed Cooper most likely would have landed, based on the flight path and the moment the crew felt the pressure change. They combed through miles of steep, tree-covered terrain. They found nothing. No parachute, no body, no money. Within 5 years, they'd considered and ruled out over 800 suspects. By some counts, that number eventually climbed past 1,000. But here's where it gets stranger. Nearly 9 years later, on February 10th, 1980, an 8-year-old boy named Brian Ingram is camping with his family along a sandy stretch of the Columbia River known as Tina Bar. He's digging in the sand, the way kids do, when his hand hits something solid. He pulls up 3 rotting bundles of $20 bills, held together with rubber bands that have long since disintegrated. $5,800 in total. His father contacts authorities. The serial numbers are checked. They match Cooper's ransom money exactly. But Tina Bar is miles away from the suspected jump zone. And despite extensive searches of the area, no other bills, no parachute, no clothing, no trace of anything else is ever found there. Or anywhere. To this day, not a single other bill from that ransom has ever turned up. Not in circulation. Not in a bank. Nowhere. So what happened to him? How does a man jump out of a plane in the middle of a storm, over wilderness, in street clothes, and vanish so completely that even $200,000, money that would be nearly impossible to spend without being noticed, never surfaces again? The theories are endless, and none of them have ever been confirmed. Richard Floyd McCoy Jr. pulled an almost identical hijacking just 5 months later. Same kind of plane, same aft staircase jump, this time demanding $500,000. The FBI loved him as a suspect for years. But McCoy didn't match the physical description given by the flight attendants. And there were reports he'd had Thanksgiving dinner with his family in Utah the same night Cooper jumped. McCoy later escaped from prison in 1974 and was killed in a shootout with an FBI agent. He never confessed to being Cooper. But in 2023, McCoy's adult children came forward publicly for the first time. They claimed they'd found a parachute rig and a logbook hidden in storage on the family's property. Items, they say, that placed their father at the scene of the original hijacking, not just his own copycat crime. They say they waited until their mother died before revealing it. The FBI has not confirmed their claims. Then there's Dwayne Weber, a man with a criminal past who, according to his wife, whispered on his deathbed in 1995, "I'm Dan Cooper." In 2001, the FBI tested DNA recovered from the tie left on the plane. It didn't match Weber. Kenneth Christensen, a former employee of Northwest Orient and a trained paratrooper, was named by his own brother as a suspect. He was a heavy smoker, fit parts of the physical profile, and somehow bought a house in cash within a year of the hijacking. But he didn't match the height and build described by those who spent the most time with Cooper. The FBI moved on. Robert Rackstraw, a Vietnam veteran with explosives training and a long criminal record, became the subject of books and documentaries in 2016. He faked his own death in 1978 by radioing a false distress call from a plane over California. He denied being Cooper for years, though some say his denials were always just cryptic enough to keep the question alive. He died in 2019. Nothing was ever proven. But that wasn't the strangest part. In 2025, newly released FBI files revealed something that hadn't been made public before. That abandoned tie, the one Cooper took off before he jumped, was coated in more than 100,000 microscopic particles. Rare metals, bismuth, unalloyed titanium, materials that, in 1971, would have been found almost exclusively in specialized manufacturing or engineering environments. It's reopened questions about whether Cooper worked in aerospace, in metallurgy, in advanced industrial production. Someone whose grudge, the one he mentioned to Tina Mucklow, might not have been personal at all, but professional. The kind of grudge that festers in a laboratory, a factory floor, a place where men worked with materials most people had never heard of. The hijacking changed aviation forever. The FAA mandated a device, nicknamed the Cooper vane, on every 727 in service, making it mechanically impossible to lower the aft stairs during flight. Airports began installing metal detectors and baggage screening as standard practice nationwide. In a strange way, Cooper didn't just disappear into the woods. He disappeared into policy, into procedure, into the architecture of every flight you've ever taken since. In July 2016, the FBI officially redirected active resources away from the case, citing a lack of new, actionable leads. But they never closed it. A 1976 grand jury indictment against John Doe, a.k.a. Dan Cooper, for air piracy still stands, waiting for a body, waiting for a name, waiting for evidence that has never come. Most of the investigators who worked the case believe Cooper didn't survive. The jump was made in darkness, in rain, over steep forested mountains. He was wearing loafers and a suit. He had no way of knowing one of his 2 reserve parachutes was a sewn-shut dummy. And the odds, they say, were against him from the start. But likely has never been the same as proof. And in 53 years, no body has ever been found. No confirmed identity has ever been established. No one knows for certain whether Dan Cooper walked away into the trees that night, lived quietly somewhere under another name, spending his money slowly, carefully, over decades. or whether he never made it out of the sky at all. All we know for sure is this. On the night of November 24th, 1971, a man stepped off the back of a plane into a storm, and the world never saw him again. Somewhere out there, in the forests or the river or buried in soil, no one has ever turned over. The answer is still waiting. And that concludes tonight's case from Soggy Matchbox. Some mysteries are eventually solved. Others, it seems, are destined to remain in the dark. If you'd like to uncover more cases like these, make sure you're subscribed, because some things just need one more strike before they finally catch. Until next time.